Before I start, I just want to say that I'm aware that HITC Sport uploaded a similarly formatted video yesterday before any of you tell me in the comments. As you may or may not know, there isn't much collaboration or communication between the channels. In fact, I've never even met Michael or James, so whilst the content of the two channels tends to be fairly different, as nonetheless two football-orientated YouTube channels, there are bound to be occasions in which they overlap. Fortunately for those of you who enjoy both channels, and I believe there are actually surprisingly few people who are fans of both from the analytics, I haven't seen James's video, and I made this before it came out, so there shouldn't be too much overlap in terms of the actual content. Right. The metaphorical transfer window has now slammed shut, meaning the squads that Premier League teams have assembled will be their squads for the rest of the season. Well, that's not actually true. It's only the international window that's slammed shut. The domestic window still has about a week and a bit left until it closes, and then obviously there's the January transfer window, which will run pretty much as normal, although naturally that means it runs earlier than usual in relation to the season, given that January is already less than 3 months away. Anyhow, with that enormous disclaimer out of the way, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that the bulk of the summer's transfer business has now been done, and we saw that with the urgency in which teams looked to push through deals on the final day of the window. Arsenal pulled off the signing of Thomas Partey from Atletico Madrid, as Lucas Torreira headed on loan in the opposite direction. Fulham struck an impressive deal to bring in Ruben Loftus-Cheek from Chelsea on a season-long loan, and Manchester United finally got their hands on young England star Jadon Sancho. Oh, what's that? I'm just getting news in my earpiece that one didn't actually go through. Apologies, I wasn't paying that close attention and I just assumed they'd get that one over the line. Oh well, all is not lost since the Red Devils did manage to bring in 2 Uruguayans, one young and one old, so that's something, at least, isn't it? Well, we'll soon find out, in my opinion at least, since I'll be casting my judgment on every Premier League team's transfer business in this beguilingly brilliant video for all of your viewing pleasures. Here is how I would rank every Premier League team's transfer business in this summer transfer window. 20th, Burnley. Burnley aren't normally ones to break the bank during a transfer window, but there is normally the odd addition that catches the eye. This summer, that hasn't really been the case, and the Clarets could well pay the price. Whilst those around them have made strides to improve, Sean Dyche's men have stood still. And if, as I would presume, that wasn't the Burnley boss's own decision, I'm slightly surprised that he hasn't actually resigned. The Clarets' only 2 senior additions were backup goalkeeper Will Norris and Dale Stephens, essentially arriving as replacements for Joe Hart and Jeff Hendrick, who departed. What's more, they're probably downgrades on Hart and Hendrick if we're being honest, and if I were to grade Burnley's summer window, I'd have to give them a D-. They're spared from an E or an F only by virtue of the fact that they didn't lose the likes of Nick Pope, their 2 excellent centre-backs, or Dwight McNeil. It's going to be a long, hard season for Burnley, one suspects, and while Sean Dyche has worked miracles before, the Clarets will be relying on 1 or 2 teams really struggling in order to avoid the drop. 19th, Southampton. Southampton might have confirmed the return of Theo Walcott on loan on transfer deadline day, but in truth, it was a fairly quiet window for the Saints. In addition to Walcott, Ralph Hasenhüttl oversaw the arrival of Mohamed Salisu from Real Valladolid and Ibrahima Diallo from Brest. Meanwhile, Kyle Walker-Peters made his loan move a permanent one. There were also a few notable departures from St Mary's, primarily Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who departed for Tottenham, but also Sofiane Boufal and Guido Carrillo, who cost the club a combined total of £34 million, and both left this summer for absolutely nothing. Fortunately for the Saints, they already had a decent 11 with everyone fit, and with Danny Ings firing, they should be able to avoid the drop. 18th, Manchester United. Not quite last, but in the relegation zone in terms of poor transfer windows, Manchester United's struggles in the transfer market have been very well documented, primarily due to the fact that everything that happens at Old Trafford is very well documented. The Red Devils had a handful of supposed targets that they couldn't get over the line, most notably Jadon Sancho, and in the end, they only made one signing who I think you could definitively say walks into their best 11 every week, and that's Alex Telles. Donny van der Beek and Edinson Cavani will both offer plenty, but they're unlikely to help Ole Gunnar Solskjaer challenge for the Premier League title. Meanwhile, Facundo Pellistri is surely one for the future, and Odion Ighalo seems unlikely to get much game time following Cavani's arrival. 17th, West Ham. I think the business that West Ham did this summer was pretty decent. The problem was that there wasn't enough of it. The Hammers' January business last season was excellent, bringing Jared Bowen and Thomas Souček, who I thought were 2 of their 3 best players, as David Moyes' men successfully avoided relegation. Unfortunately, however, the club didn't really manage to build upon that momentum. Souček's loan move became permanent, the experienced Vladimir Kufal should add some solidity at right back, and Asoma Ashley arrived on a free from Wimbledon but seems unlikely to step straight into the club's first team. Despite an underwhelming window for the Hammers fans and the controversial sale of Grady Dean Garner, West Ham have made a decent start this season, and the resurgent form of players like Mikel Antonio and Angelo Ogbonna in recent months are almost like new signings in of themselves. 16th, Sheffield United. I've made no secret of my admiration for the job Chris Wilder has done at Sheffield United and previously at Northampton Town, but there's no doubt he's got a fight on his hands to avoid a harsh case of second season syndrome over the next 7 or 8 months. The Blades replaced Dean Henderson with Aaron Ramsdale over the summer, bringing Ethan Ampadu on loan from Chelsea at centre-back, and then turning their attention largely towards the forward areas. I really like Rhian Brewster, but he'll need support, and despite commanding a large fee, this is still his first season of Premier League football. It's worth remembering. Oliver Burke is a classic Wilder signing, as someone with a huge amount to prove, but whether he'll do that remains unknown. One thing I will say about Sheffield United signings, and I don't want to sound too downbeat here, is that if the worst happens and they were to go down, I think they're very well equipped to come straight back up again. 15th, Leicester City. Following a stunning start to the season, Leicester City were well and truly humbled at the hands of West Ham. Despite an impressive start, I don't think the Foxes had the most awe-inspiring transfer window. They lost Ben Chilwell for a good fee, although they still lost him, whilst Timothy Castagna, Cengiz Under and Wesley Fofana came in. Leicester have been brilliant at replacing departed players in recent years, whether it be Riyad Mahrez or Harry Maguire, and I think Castagna is a really shrewd arrival. Fofana is likely to be one for the future, and Under relatively risk-free on a season-long loan, and whilst I don't think the Foxes have had a blockbuster window, I still think they're in a great place. The beauty of the Leicester squad is that so many of their key men are still young and still developing, whether it be Maddison, Tielemans and Didi or Barnes, so a blockbuster window was never really required. 14. Fulham. Written off after just 3 games, some bookies have already paid out Fulham getting relegated. I think that's rather cruel, or a rather crude marketing ploy should I say, but there ought to be no better motivator for the players that remain at Craven Cottage. Fulham's best piece of business came on deadline day with the arrival of Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and alongside Andre Frank, Zambo and Gisa, the Cottagers have the makings of a really good midfield. There has been further strengthening in midfield, at fullback and on the flanks, but the real problems for Scott Parker lie in central defence. That's the reason why I can see Fulham shipping a dangerous amount of goals this season, but their squad is still a much stronger one now than it was a couple of months ago. 13th, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Possibly the most difficult window to assess, whilst other teams make established superstars their club record signing, Wolves have chosen to make their club record signing an 18-year-old who will most likely serve as Raul Jimenez's deputy this season. Fabio Silva is fabulously talented, but extremely young, and when you weigh up Wolves' departures versus their arrivals this summer, I think it's possible to argue that they actually looked slightly stronger last season. That being said, they've made signings for the long term, and if they can remain competitive and not lose too much ground, they may be very well placed over the next few years. Oh, and they managed to nail Jimenez down on a new deal, which was absolutely crucial. 12th, Manchester City. Coming in roughly mid-table, the jury is probably still out on Pep Guardiola's transfer business this summer. Personally, I think Man City needed a left-back, and as I've said previously, unless Benjamin Mendy can really turn his form around, I wouldn't be surprised to see Nathan Ake occupying that left-back spot before too long. Ruben Dias has seemed like a likely arrival at the Etihad for the last 12 months, and sure enough, he came in for a big fee, along with Ferran Torres and Nathan Ake. Torres was an absolute bargain, although slightly counteracted by the sale of Leroy Sane. Meanwhile, David Silva will be replaced from within by Phil Foden. The Citizens have made slight improvements without setting the world alight, and the partnership of Dias and Laporte will most likely determine the success of their window. 11th, Liverpool. Narrowly above their toughest competitors for the Premier League title, the division's reigning champions pulled off a couple of key signings after things looked worryingly quiet at one stage. Wholesale changes obviously weren't required at Anfield, but Jurgen Klopp managed to bring in depth at left-back, central midfield and on the flank. The signing of Diogo Jota was crucial in case of an injury to Mane or Salah. Meanwhile, Thiago Alcantara brings a touch of class to an often very functional midfield. I still think Liverpool are a couple of injuries away from being in a bit of trouble, but everyone they brought in made perfect sense. 10th, Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton have been fairly shrewd operators in the transfer market under Graham Potter, although I think a case could be made for tying Ben White down on a new deal, being their best piece of business over these last couple of months. Sadly for the Seagulls, they had to send Shane Duffy on loan to Celtic due to their depth at centre-back, but I think the Brighton squad is a really interesting one now. Joel Veltman and Adam Lallana are both clever additions, provided Lallana can stay fit, so 10th spot seems about right for Brighton. 9th, Newcastle United. From dreams of Mbappe and Sancho, a new owner, and untold riches, Newcastle's somewhat typical Mike Ashley transfer window may seem somewhat underwhelming. In truth though, I think Newcastle have done some really smart business, and they've done it on a limited budget. Jeff Hendrick and Ryan Fraser arrived on frees, whilst Callum Wilson set the club back £20 million and Jamal Lewis cost a reported £15 million. Wilson has scored 4 goals in his first 4 games at St James's Park, and I think he'll flourish under Steve Bruce. Meanwhile, the other 2 both strengthen the Geordies' side. Newcastle's window may not have been particularly eye-catching, but they've done some solid business, and I think they're a much better team for it. 8th, West Bromwich Albion. West Brom may still be one of the bookies' favourites for the drop, along with Fulham, and they may indeed end up getting relegated this season, but it won't be the result of a complacent transfer window. As expected, arguably the Baggies' best player, Matthias Pereira, made his loan move a permanent one, as did Grady Diangana, and Slaven Bilic's side were also strengthened by the arrivals of the likes of Callum Robinson and Branislav Ivanovic. I think there's a good blend to the Baggies' recruits, and whilst I'm not about to put money on them staying up, I think they'll put up more of a fight than many people seem to expect. 7th, Leeds United. 2 promoted clubs in quick succession, Leeds United's transfer window could fairly be described as chaotic but productive. Marcelo Bielsa seemed to have more targets than the city of Chicago, and that's a big box retailer joke for all of our US subscribers, many of whom seemed to fall through at the last second. Ben White was pursued intensely but with no success, Rodrigo de Paul seemed likely at one stage, and Mikel Cuisance had apparently already said his goodbyes at Bayern Munich before failing a medical. Despite those hiccups, Leeds completed the signings of Rodrigo, Robin Koch, Rafinha and Diego Llorente, among others. Meanwhile, Helder Costa and Illan Melier's loan moves became permanent. I think Robin Koch and Diego Llorente are excellent signings, Costa and Melier have already proved their potential, and Rodrigo, whilst a tad expensive, will no doubt improve Marcelo Bielsa's side. Ultimately, Leeds' window could have been excellent, but it was still very good. 6th, Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace's transfer window might not have taken too many headlines, but I think it was a very astute one. First and foremost, they didn't lose anyone significant, most notably Wilfred Zaha. Nathan Ferguson came in for free from West Brom, and I think he'll prove to be a brilliant addition. And the same goes for young Eberechi Eze from Queen's Park Rangers. I thought Eze was the second best player in the Championship last season, and with the right development, he could become one hell of a player. Michy Batshuayi was the icing on the cake, having impressed in his previous loan spell at Selhurst Park, and his arrival was much needed given the Eagles' lack of goals in their side. 5th, Aston Villa. My top 5 in this list were never really in doubt, but the order of them was. Getting us started is Aston Villa, who have obviously made a fabulous start to the season. As with a few clubs, the biggest moment for Villa was keeping hold of their star man, and I'm referring of course to club captain Jack Grealish. The England international was convinced of a project at Villa Park, and we may be seeing signs of that project in the early parts of this season. Ollie Watkins may have seemed expensive for an initial £28 million with a further £5 million in add-ons, but his potential is enormous, and another Championship star in the form of Matty Cash joined him through the door. Emiliano Martinez and Bertrand Traore are both ambitious additions which fix clear problems for Dean Smith's side, and Ross Barkley on loan caught almost everyone by surprise. All round, a fantastic window for Villa, and it's one which means very few people fancy them to go down this season even after just a few games. 4th, Arsenal. Arsenal already would have been in my top 5 prior to deadline day and the introduction of Thomas Partey, but that signing fires them into 4th. The Gunners' 3 key signings along with Partey were Willian, Gabriel Magalhaes and Dani Ceballos, the last of whom arrived on loan once again from Real Madrid. Compare and contrast that with Manchester United, where I suggested only one addition has almost certainly improved their best 11. At Arsenal, you're talking about 4 players who do that, and that's in addition to William Saliba, who comes into the picture following a loan move, and Gabriel Martinelli once he returns to full fitness. There are certainly calls for optimism at the Emirates, and thanks to Mesut Ozil, the club hasn't even lost the services of the Gunnosaurus, although the whole thing is a little embarrassing from an Arsenal perspective as far as I'm concerned. 3rd, Tottenham Hotspur. Having slept through their last few transfer windows, either not knowing what one was or being tricked into thinking they weren't allowed to participate, Tottenham came back with a bang this summer. We know that Jose Mourinho likes to sign players who can make an instant impact, and that's exactly what he has got. Gareth Bale joins Harry Kane and Son Heung-min to form a formidable forward line, with Carlos Vinicius offering some much needed support to Kane. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg adds some grit to the Spurs midfield, Matt Doherty brings genuine creativity for a modest fee, and Sergio Reguillon is close to becoming, if not already being, a world-class left-back. Of the lot, I honestly think Reguillon is the most impressive, an absolute snip at just £25 million, but Bale and Højbjerg also offer an awful lot. A better window than almost any Spurs fan had expected, I suspect, and they take third. Second, Everton. It's easy to say that Everton have done smart transfer business following the Toffees' terrific start to the season, but their inclusion is about a bit more than that. Oftentimes a little under the radar, Everton have done some of the worst business in world, never mind English football, over the last few years, but they have finally shown some diligence in the market under Carlo Ancelotti. Undoubtedly able to attract a higher calibre of player under the multiple-time Champions League winning Italian boss, James Rodriguez, stands out as the club's most eye-catching arrival, but the signing of Alan from Ancelotti's former club is arguably just as impressive. Abdoulaye Doucouré is someone subscribers will know I've long sung the praises of on this channel, and he too has added something a bit different to the Everton midfield. Meanwhile, later rival Ben Godfrey has a phenomenal ceiling for just £20 million. The only reason Everton don't top this video is because they haven't yet signed a new number one, and honestly, I can see Jordan Pickford becoming a big problem. Apparently the Toffees came close to striking a deal for Sergio Romero, who would have been a very good addition, but that's all that's really holding them back. First, Chelsea. It's not just that Chelsea seemingly signed more players and spent more money than everyone else. As Everton prove, you don't need to spend vast sums to sign very good players, but the Blues have recruited some serious long-term talent. Other than Thiago Silva, everyone that they have signed ought to improve over the next few years, and unlike the Toffees, they did fix their goalkeeping dilemma, replacing Kepa Arrizabalaga with Edouard Mendy. Ben Chilwell adds solidity at left back, Hakim Ziyech is a master creator, stop laughing, I said creator, Timo Werner scored prolifically in the Bundesliga, and Kai Havertz is one of the best young players on earth. I'm not sure whether Chelsea will hit the jackpot and gel as a fantastic team this season, or even whether Frank Lampard is the man to get the best out of this star-studded team, but the players themselves are fantastic, and I don't think anyone in the Premier League had a better transfer window purely in terms of additions and departures. So that is it for today's video. I'm sure you have your disagreements with me, which I welcome, so feel free to leave your thoughts down below in the comments, whether they're friendly or otherwise. Thank you all as ever for watching, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to HITC Sevens, and you can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram, where the username is simply @HITC Sevens on both platforms.